projects. We've been so lucky to work in long-standing partnership with this office within the DOE for actually more than 25 years. In looking back, the first event that we ever held in collaboration with them happened in April of 1997 with Sharon Dunn.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's worth applause. 25 years, my goodness. So since I joined the Roundtable in 2017, I have had the pleasure of working with OASP under the tremendous leadership of Paul King, Maria Palma, and now Paul Thompson. I first met Paul at Tweed Courthouse, or DOE Central, where he took me on a tour of the building before we sat down and had just the most fabulous conversation about arts, education, family, policy, systems. And although he'd only been in the role for about a little less than a month at the time, his eye for detail and also just general appreciation for Tweed's nuanced architectural history has really set the tone for our collaboration since. In preparation, I should say, for today's event, change hands, there we go. Our moderator, Gary Padmore, so brilliantly noted to me that Paul leads this office as an artist, and I think you'll see what he means through today's conversation. Prior to his appointment as Executive Director of the Office of Arts and Special Projects, Paul spent 17 years serving as Principal of Urban Assembly School of Music and Art, also known as UAMA, which is a non-screen Title I public arts high school that he founded in 2005, located in Dumbo, Brooklyn. In this role, he designed and implemented all aspects of the school, including curriculum and instruction, arts programming, and youth development. Most recently, his work in conjunction with the Bard Early College established Bard Early College Academy at UAMA, where students can earn college credits while taking classes with Bard Early College professors on site at UAMA. Prior to his work in education, Thompson had a career as a musician and composer, and he continues to write and perform music. He's worked across genres ranging from hip-hop to classical to jazz, and has toured internationally and across the U.S. Now our moderator, Gary Padmore, is the VP of Education and Community Engagement at the New York Philharmonic, and brings with him decades of experience in education and community work. Prior to his work at the Philharmonic, Gary was Director of Education and Community at the Orchestra of St. Luke's, where he created a concert series celebrating works by composers of color, doubled enrollment in its youth orchestra program, and increased school and community partnerships. Gary has also led education programs at Midori and Friends, Brooklyn Philharmonic, and served as an adjunct lecturer at Queens College, as well as being a teaching artist for several organizations. As a trumpet player himself and a native New Yorker, Gary has degrees from Queens College and Maine School of Music. He was also named one of Musical America's top 30 professionals of the year in 2019. Please join me now in welcoming Gary and Paul to the stage.
Good morning, good morning.
Good morning.
How y'all doing?
Good morning.
Wait, how y'all doing? Okay, all right. Yeah,
See, can we need to do that.
the dance thing?
No, well, no, not
Oh,
the
okay,
dance thing.
'cause I can't
but
dance.
So
Okay.
as a New Yorker,
Okay.
and you address a crowd, you have to hit a, Ayo!
Alright. You know. And you know, we were chatting a little bit last week, and one thing I didn't ask is what the best borough was. I knew it was Brooklyn, but I was curious about what you thought. I thought what you thought was the best borough.
Well, I live in Brooklyn,
Alright,
but I rep BX hard.
All right. We'll take it.
I rep BX hard.
We'll
So
take it.
I gotta be in both.
Okay, all right. Well, no judgment. Well, there is this. I'm judging hard, but so anyway, good morning. So we're gonna get into it. We're obviously gonna, talk a little bit about who Paul is. Hey, camera. Sorry, I'm awkward in the morning, so just forgive me if I just start going off my
You were
tangent.
just dancing.
No, I was in the corner though. I wasn't in the.
I was
I hope
with
I
you.
didn't
You were
get it.
dancing.
Okay, all right. Don't tell my wife. But as far as just our purpose for this conversation, we want to be able to understand who you are. Is that me? You all hearing
I
that?
think it's the phone.
Is it? What's going on? Check.
My phone.
This? It's me. What should I do? I'm not good at microphones. This is good? Stay still. I move around a lot. I don't know how to do this. Okay, so we want to be able to understand who you are, and also the role of OASP. And also, because we're a room of artists, administrators, leaders, funders, we want to understand how we can support your work, complement your work in many ways. And so to start with, I know we started with dance. I wanted to kind of have a bit of a starting point in terms of the arts. And so there's a recording I want you to respond to. As Kim mentioned, I work at the New York Philharmonic. Last year, we celebrated just music. And so there was a work by someone who I think you know that we were able to feature as a part of that. And so I think Kim or someone is going to be able to play that clip right now.
If we only knew what we could do. If we only knew what we could do, we stop fussing and fighting and feeling blue. If we only knew that juice, cause of an African connection that we can't cut loose. If the light was on in our minds, we wouldn't diss ourselves so much all the time. Stop and realize without disguise, we got the power to change what's before our eyes. When there is poverty and misery, we bring hope, joy, love, and security. There wouldn't be no need to lock your doors at night. No one lives in the dark and everyone sees a light. If we only knew what we could do.
Hey, all right. So you recognize that voice?
I do. That's my man Abiodun Oyewole.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. So you told me last week you were describing your trajectory as an artist, and as Kim mentioned, you started as you start your leadership like through the lens of an artist, and just tell us about like what that journey was. Like, how did you get to becoming an artist? I know you were a dancer back in the '80s. You were a hip hop kid. But college, what you were describing about college, I found incredible in the woods, which I was like, what was going on? So maybe I shouldn't have mentioned that, but I found it fascinating. So if you wouldn't mind sharing with the group, like what was that beginning for you, like as it related to Abiodun?
Well, it's funny. So Abiodun is an old friend. I love Dune. I met him when I was in college. But to sort of predate some of the college stuff, I think it's important to just ground. My life as an artist really is as a kid who was not successful in school. School was not a safe or successful place for me. And so growing up in New York in the 80s, I gravitated towards really something that I have understood saved my life, which is just the arts, being able to express myself as a means of coming to terms with who I am, where I'm from, grounding myself in creation. And that was all born in early hip hop. I grew up dancing and writing graffiti. Really, I grew up, and I was telling Jody this, I think, some of the folks you taught, I went to middle school with, and we went to the Beach Street audition. Because that was my first form of expression. And then graffiti immediately eclipsed that just because of the ways in which trains would bust into the stations and look like stained glass. And so I really made being a graffiti writer my vocation at, 12, 13 years old. And so rather than be in school, I spent most of my time really just learning that art. And it is through that I learned rigor, agency. I learned what it meant to be inspired by something, just a feeling, and create something and see it through to its end in all of its parts. And whatever the thing you had to do in order to complete it was just a thing to be done, right? So if that meant you had to find the paint, you had to find the paint. If that meant you had to be in the tunnels, then you had to be in the tunnels. And, all of that sounds crazy to me a little bit today in reference to if we knew our kids were doing that. But I think it speaks to, where New York was. I was a latchkey kid, so we raised in many ways ourselves. Not to say I didn't come from a loving family, I did, and folks were super educated, but because I wasn't good in school, that sort of made life at home rough. And you figured it out as a New York City kid. And the arts and hip hop really helped us do that. And I've been reminding people, and I don't want to offend folks, but it's the spirit through which sort of I founded my school, and that is just that the arts, when I was growing up, happened despite the adults. Right? So hip hop is born in our New York City public schools, but it's born in the bathrooms, the staircases, the lunchrooms, the playgrounds. It wasn't born in necessarily arts classes. And so my relationship to being an artist is really rooted and grounded in just a self-drive that I think is a part of that culture.
And how did you start picking up trumpet? What was that?
So because I was self-motivated, I was lucky enough, even though I was a horrible student, I was able to get into college. And to be frank, a lot of that had to do with just who my parents were. Both of my parents were educated. My father was a dentist, my mother was a nurse, they both went to Columbia. So I come from a tradition of education.
Right.
I was rooted in the dominant culture. And so when it was time to go to college, I knew that fluency, I knew that literacy. And being a kid who just grew up in hip hop, I had a friend of mine who got me into Miles Davis, and I was like, wow, Miles Davis is changed my life. And so I didn't know any better. I thought I could just buy a trumpet for $50 at the pawn shop and, at 18 years old and pick it up. And I literally didn't know any better. Like, I was too dumb to know that you just don't do that. And so I did it. And then I went into this is what we were talking about. I would be out in the woods. I went to Bard College. And so you could be in the woods there just blowing into this horn, sort of sounding like a dead moose. And, it's Bard, so no one thought anything weird about it. And it was really just through happenstance that someone, I guess, heard me dying in the woods and was like, do you know we have a trumpet professor here? So I went and I took my $50 trumpet that I kept in a paper bag to his office. I knocked on the door. I had no idea who this person was. And I just sort of held out my horn and said, I'm trying to learn how to play this. I understand you teach it. Can you show me something? And he said, sure. And I ended up studying trumpet improvisation and composition with this person. And thank God it was Wadada Leo Smith, who's just a luminary in the sort of free avant-garde jazz world. Because given how I accessed this, if I had knocked on the door of someone who was a straight traditionalist, they would have told me to go away. But this was a person who said, and we discussed this, he only taught me one scale.
Right.
F. He taught me F. And he taught me Monin.
Yeah.
Art Blakely and Jazz Messengers.
Yeah.
And he said, that's the only song I'll ever teach you, and it's the only Western scale I'll ever show you. I will tell you where to go if this is a tradition you want to learn, but you should understand that for all of the people there are around the world, they all have different systems. And so you should find the one that resonates for you. So he never pushed anything on me, which was great for me, but it also meant there was a lot of work to do.
So I think there's a lot of threads I noticed, even in terms of our work. The idea of systems. The idea of being student-centered in our work. The fact that you were the one sort of driving your trajectory to an extent. Art. Obviously it was the community, it was the environment, circumstances. But how do you feel like a lot of that work has now translated to where you are now? Like in your role at OASP, how like does the sort of the artist in you and this idea of being student-centered in your art, you know, and leading your art, like how does that sort of inform your work now at OASP?
Well, I think I can't even begin to talk about starting this work without sort of just talking about the founding of and the running of UAMA. I think because that's where I learned sort of. I think the thing we're heading to, which is just I wanted to found a school that would have catered to a kid like me, which means no screen, no audition, because I got screened out and auditioned out of the schools because I was applying to all the same high schools, but I didn't have the literacy to really navigate school well. So I didn't get into LaGuardia. I didn't get into art and design, and it's good that I didn't. But I wanted to create a school for a kid like me who was already sort of screened out of the acceptable dominant culture programs. And I wanted to build a home where student voice was really the most important thing that happened in our whole experience. I regularly preached to our staff and to our kids that your voice is the most valuable commodity you have in life. Because if you're able to express yourself, then you can navigate the dominant culture in some way where you have some agency, and you can make decisions around the complicated nature of our lives. And so I spent 17 years just testing and learning what that really meant. And you know, it was a journey. Because I walked in, you know, I had some preconceived notions also, even if I didn't know it. I walked in with some stuff that was really about sort of adult control, which, you know, a lot of the construct of school is about control. And it took me a little while to like get that burned out of me. Like, right? Like this is not about Paul's experience. This is about creating a safe environment so that students can really find their voice and develop some agency, because, you know, we were getting kids in 9th grade, and this is a secret, you know, we were getting 9th graders who had 4th, 5th, 6th grade reading levels. And as an undiagnosed dyslexic, I know how difficult it is to read. But there's no substitution for just spending time to read, right? Like you have to do it. The same way if you want to learn the horn, you have to play the horn. Like you got to put in the 10,000 hours, and it's going to look however it needs to look for you.
Right.
But if you don't have a safe place to do that, it's very difficult to admit what you don't know and have that be exposed and develop the agency to work through it. And so that's really what we were focused on in the 17 years that sort of I grew with my school and our students. And, you know, I would have to tell folks we're not a conservatory, and we had a lot of artists come in who were friends who, you know, they talked about like, yeah, we're here for the kids, we're here for the experience. But you quickly saw that if they didn't have a specific kind of control, they didn't want any part of the experience. And so I lost some friends because they said that they were loose and liberal and understanding and had empathy, but really when it butted up against making them feel uncomfortable or feeling as though they didn't have power, they were like, right, what am I doing here? Your kids are wild.
Right.
Why they act like this? And you know, some of these are prominent artists that we know.
And mention names? No, I'm just kidding.
I don't hate on them. I just say that to say, you know, one of the things I would tell my teachers, new teachers, I was always hiring new teachers. And I would tell them it's going to take you 3 to 5 years if you're lucky, but you should really spend this time trying to figure out who it is you want to teach. Because if what you want to do is teach at LaGuardia, that's cool. That's a thing. You can do that. But this ain't LaGuardia.
Right.
So if you expect to come in a classroom and snap your fingers and have everybody just be at attention and be expert at that literacy, or at least be aware of that literacy, then you should go somewhere. You should go to LaGuardia, because you're going to just torture the kids here.
But
you know,
I guess I would argue, though. I mean, I feel like LaGuardia needs that kind of focus too, right? In terms of like being student centered. I mean, I get what you're saying in terms of like the skill that's like maybe different in a LaGuardia, for example, versus your school. But I think even in those environments that may be quote unquote more structured or more whatever, like there needs to also be that kind of like student-led learning, so that the artist also evolves and not just like, I'm imparting knowledge on you, but which is I think what we all need, like around our field, is having that kind of culture and thinking. So now, given where that is now, like the fact that like your framing is as it is, which I mean I'm inspired by that, and I think many of us in this room, if we're not doing that now, that we're hoping to be there with our teaching artists and with ourselves as administrators. How does that like now translate to the work that you're doing?
Right.
OASP.
well, I think again, my constitution and where I live is always around student voice, and so for me, I want to just affect and create as many opportunities as possible for students to be able to practice their voice, and that means many different things, right? And again, all of this is wrapped up sort of into the nature of what our schools are, the fact that we're in a segregated system. So like all of it's a complicated thing. So voice can look like many different things. But I really have a passion for voice that helps one sort of just find their way, that helps sort of just soothe the day, to give you as an individual just some grounding, so that you can find some peace in this sort of the unknowable essence of what this experience is. Right. The arts are great to just live in that space and to talk about and experience what life on this planet is like. And so, at 90,000 feet, that feels great. What does that look like on the ground? I think it's what I bring into this role as someone who has figured out how to run a school in a bureaucracy as big as the DOE. I like to think that I never became a bureaucrat, but I did understand how to build systems. And even though I'm an artist, I'm a creative, I had to learn my own language, my own way of creating order and systems. And so some of the work that I think I can bring to this office is just that, as someone who's school-based. I think I'm the first person in this position who's actually run a school.
Yes.
And just happened to also be an artist who was a working artist. Depending on how much time I have during the day, at any given time of the year, I'm still a working artist. But that's an important knowledge, because the bureaucracy of this thing is really complicated. It's the Department of Ed is the largest school system in the country, like by any other, like by far. You'd have to take 2 or 3 large cities to just compare it to New York. And so one of the things I think I can offer this office is some systems, so that we can understand just how do you support 1 million students in, depending on where you're living, it could be 1,600 to 1,700 schools. It's a you have to have systems to be able to understand how to, like what you're doing, within that.
Right. I'm trying not to move away. I don't know what the heck I'm doing with this. I'm sorry. Should we try something to see if this works?
I'm going to put this one down. Maybe it's
check.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, let's do that. All right, that's a good idea. See, this is why you're an artist. You know how to make it work. So in terms of those systems, and I know there are folks from OASP, I see, right, some faces, I see.
OASP is in the house.
Where we at? Come on, they're like, oh, there you go. And so obviously we've benefited from this department, as Kim mentioned, for over 25 years. And there's some great people who've come from our community and have gone on to this work in OASP, and there are folks that to your point have come through different paths to their positions. How do you sort of envision structuring this department in a way that kind of services the schools and also is a resource for the arts and education community?
So I think to talk about that, it helps to just say, so when I started this job on September 1st, and I have a real reverence for history. And so some of the people who really grounded my understanding of the enormity of this work was Jody Arnhold and Aggie Gunn. I've said this to you before, Jody, some of the early meetings that I went to with you guys, like in August, I understood the just urgency that you all have brought to this work for as long as you have, and that urgency was really burning behind a memory of the arts being gutted in the 70s. And I understood that from the perspective of a student who was in the system,
Right.
but I didn't necessarily understand it from being within the system. And so I was really taken aback by just the level of that energy, that this could all boom go away, because it has before. And so I had to really reorient myself in understanding, like, okay, so this is like an existential problem that I need to always be calibrating around. And so that was one of the first things that helped to just ground me into understanding what historically the folks before me, being Sharon Dunn and Paul King, and Maria Palma, like, what were the things that had been done, and how had things been added on and progressed. I needed to begin, because I didn't have a relationship with this office as a principal, so I had to really learn what were the things that wove all of this together. And for me, it helped to just understand it through a historical arc. And so whether you're talking about all of the different layers that have been added on over time. So you have the citywide art directors, right? So as you think about sort of citywide support and the programs that go through that and how they're organized, and then you have the borough art directors, and then you have that really are in all 5 boroughs. I mean, it's the biggest footprint our office has throughout the city. And then the individual folks who are working with students with disabilities, and Audrey, who's working, where are you at, with the partnership constituency, and just understanding, again, with that urgency that the arts aren't actually funded in a way that they should be. Right?
Yep.
So whether it's from the state or the city, there just aren't enough arts teachers. And so that urgency, I might not have walked in the door with it, but within the first 4 weeks, I was like, right, we have to have systems that I can understand, that enable this office to take all of the pieces that have been coalesced over the years and organize it in a way so that each piece can have an outsized influence and potentially, just the power of just one person. We have to figure out how to magnify what we do as an office. So I've really just spent the last 3 months watching and learning from an incredibly dedicated group of folks who are all running around like their hair is on fire all the time because there's just so much to do. And they've been incredible in teaching me what it is they do. And I hope I've been transparent to them by just saying, hey, I just want to sit back, I want to watch, I want to advocate from this position when I can, but really for just this first semester, I need to understand what the arc of the office is. And I've slowly been thinking about ways in which all of the different pieces can be systematized in a way so that there's deeper synergy, so that the left hand really knows what the right hand is doing, and all the oars are in the water working together, so that we can have a bigger influence than potentially we have right now.
Yeah. So check. Okay, so one of the things that came up was also this idea. You alluded to this a little bit as well in terms of the inequity in our arts. The fact that there are not enough art teachers. There are also schools that have limited art programs. There are also some of us in this room. You'll go into like one school and they'll have 5 organizations, and then you'll go into another school, they have nothing. And so I'm just curious, like from your, like where you sit at OASP, like how do you sort of envision, I know you mentioned these systems, but how do you envision like sort of ensuring that these, schools, our young people and families have the opportunity to, equitably, access that resource, those resources of the arts?
Right. Well, so one of the things I quickly thought would be helpful for me to just sort of teach me sort of what was going on. The borough arts directors, they were meeting, they had sort of an established meeting that was happening once a week. And so I invited myself to that meeting and said, I promise we should keep these meetings short. Right.
They meant for short meetings.
Right. We should keep these meetings short.
Yeah.
They should be sort of purpose-driven.
Yeah.
So like I really want to know what your problems are. I don't need a book report around what you're doing. It would be better for me to understand what your problems are, and through that I'll be able to sort of learn the cycle of what's happening. And the reason why I focused first just on the borough arts directors was because coming from a school and coming from a system of networks during the Bloomberg era, I was part of the Urban Assembly. We had a very tight network, and I understood the support that we got within that structure. And so I thought that they didn't want to hear about that. Let's try this. Check.
Oh.
Don't want to hear about that either.
Can we shout? Can y'all hear us?
Big
You have the stereo voice.
And so I started going to their meetings, and I asked if we could have the director of partnerships be a part of that meeting.
Right.
And the reason my thinking of it was because I wasn't sure if those two constituencies met regularly in that way.
Right.
And whether they did or not, it was helpful for me to just sort of learn how they worked together. And I knew that because we don't have enough arts teachers, that this community really fills in the gap. Like, you all are fundamental to the arts in our schools. Like, without you all, it's not happening at the level that it's at now. And so, just being able to, just being able to have frank conversations around, everybody understanding and seeing what everybody is doing. It made me ask some questions like, are we aware of where all of our arts partners are in our schools?
Right.
And, you know, and then I just began to learn around like the complexities of this office and the system. And so, you know, the most reliable data that we have, and someone tell me if I'm wrong, it's okay, because I can be wrong as I'm learning this, but the most reliable data that we have around where our partners are in our schools is from the principal survey. The arts survey, right? And principals are the ones, or someone designee at their school fills them out, right? Well, I will tell you, I say this with a little bit of shame, but I think I will wear that publicly. I filled out mine last year and it was not accurate. And it's not that it wasn't accurate. It is that the survey felt like a bureaucratic act. And as a principal, I want to get bureaucratic things off. I just checked the box. I looked at the thing. I read it. It seemed relatively relevant. You know, to what sure, let it go out. I look at it today, and it actually wasn't correct.
Right.
And so if that is the most reliable source that we have for understanding where all of our partners are, that's not really a good source to me. And so then I was like, this is dumb. We should just go to the Office of Budget and figure out, right? Like, tell us where all the POs go out to and what the arts partners are, and that should give us an aggregated list of who everybody is. Well, then I got back, this is how maddening the bureaucracy is, we can't give you that information like that. And I said, why not? It's because the administrators union does not want us to just have a window into principal decision making. We're going to get past that because I actually need a reliable source of data beyond just saying, hi, my name's Paul, I'm the executive director of OASP. How many schools of ours are you in? Which I think I said that at least twice today. Yeah, right, I did, right? I said, you're in a lot of schools. And I know you have relationships with folks in our office, but creating some synergy around all of this stuff so I go back to, I think what I can lend are just some systems that create some deeper synergy and cohesion around the work that we're doing. And I spent the first 3 weeks just kind of on a visiting tour. So I visited all of our offices in all of the boroughs. That took 3 weeks. And interspersed in that, I was meeting with partner organizations. And the biggest feedback I got was that folks just wanted organization and systems. And so, and that was across the board. Internal OASP and external folks. And so that's some of how I'm trying to ground this work.
Thank you for that. So we're going to get into some questions soon, but thank you. I wanted to just ask a question around systems for us, especially on the arts administrative side. And as it relates to, just like timeline, like we have like certain initiatives that come out, like Summer Rising and things of that nature. And quite often we're hearing things at the very last minute. We're like, jumping on opportunities, but the ways in which communication flows through the system as of right now is not great, right? And so just, so as you know, right? And so how do you sort of imagine these new systems allowing for us to be effective? Because again, like I think when this happens, the folks who are suffering are the young people, right? Because we're not able to effectively do our jobs in a timely manner, et cetera. So how do you see like us either supporting you in creating systems that work for us, or like even like offering our insight on the things that like we feel like could be better, or whatever it is. So.
so just one step again. This is month 3, right? So one of the things that we did internally, and I think this is obviously going to grow and morph and change over time. And again, it was really born from me just trying to gain a deeper understanding as quickly as possible around the enormity of this office. But the borough's art directors had mentioned, hey, can we put out one organized newsletter from our office as opposed to a bunch of different ones? And I thought, yeah, would you please? Like, that would help me, and it would make sense, and I wouldn't have to chase around. Like, it should be, you know, like one thing. Now, mind you, I think that first one, how big was that? It was like 12 pages long. Yeah, so that's a problem. But as a way of just beginning a system, to me, it just represented being able to put all of our ideas in one place and represent them. And so that is happening internally within the DOE. That's not going out to partners.
I was
right?
going to ask if anyone has seen that. No.
That's not going out to partners yet. This is just internal DOE.
Okay.
And trust, it's 12 pages. You don't want that. Not yet. So we internally are going to, over certainly the spring semester, I think, begin to try out and test some organizational structures that really you all will be partners in helping us craft and figure out, because you know I don't have the ideas, right? We collectively have the ideas, and you know, far be it for me to think that like it's all going to come from my head. And so that is one system that is an example that I think will grow and will refine and will become far more public facing. But I will just put this out there that I only walked in the door with one idea. And I believe that this idea sort of helps coalesce the work of OASP in a way that people have been asking for. And so as I interviewed for this job, you know, one of the things that I said as I went through the different parts was that I really don't have a relationship with this office. I don't know what it does. That's kind of crazy, because this is New York City. We're the cultural arts capital of the world. Why does OASP not have a brick and mortar space that really highlights the best that our office has to offer in all aspects, whether it's professional development to our principals, superintendents, teachers, whether it's programs that are created by DOE arts teachers, or whether it's programs that you all are developing. Why don't we have a flexible space that is ours, where we can develop and broadcast what we're doing and have it really be a cultural institution in New York City, one that has sort of that faces out nationally, where people want to know, what are we doing? You come here and you can see the best that we have to offer. And so as I kept saying that through the interview process, they kept nodding and saying yes, yes, and then at the final interview they were like, right, so you should do that. You got the job. And so, you know, I quickly realized that wasn't going to happen on September 2nd. But I've been talking about it to our staff, so this is nothing that sounds new to them. And what we're going to try to do is incubate this space that we're calling tentatively right now the Hub. There's space in my former school in downtown Brooklyn to do it. And we're going to incubate some ideas throughout the spring semester so that we can try. You know, there's this term I used with my students, which was like, you need as many at-bats as possible, just practicing the thing that you want to see done. And so throughout the spring, we're going to create some at-bats for us that are going to be driven around what does professional development for our principals look like? And so just to get granular for a second, right? Like the things that control what goes on inside a school is the principal and the superintendent. Those relationships are fundamental because the principal will do what the superintendent tells them to do. And if the principal doesn't have any understanding of the arts, which having sat in rooms with them for 17 years, they don't. And it's not because they're bad people, it's just because they don't happen to be artists. And so they program for the arts in ways that feel sensible to them, right? Like, what is the system telling me or holding me accountable to? So in high school, right, you have to graduate with 2 arts credits. That's as far as I'm thinking about this now. If I don't have a love for the arts and I understand how the arts saves lives, I'm just scheduling for your 2 classes and then I'm scheduling them usually at times that gives a content teacher a prep. So it's all backwards.
Right.
And so the fundamental supports that we can provide at the hub is providing, like this, a small safe space to have principals come, hopefully inspire them with the arts, right? So they can let down, like we're not the bureaucracy coming to get them, right? We want to be able to take the inspiration of the arts that they feel and have that be embedded in the instructional core of their school. Because if it's embedded in the instructional core in their school, well, then everything starts there. And from there you look at the schedule, which no principal wants to break, because principals don't know how to program. So when you have a schedule, you want to not break it.
Right.
But if we can support them to see how you start your schedule with the arts and then build out from there your staffing, your budget. And so this is some of the work that we want to be doing and incubating this spring.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I think we're getting a better sense of how to work with your office, and I mean, obviously we've been doing that, and I'm glad to hear that you're really trying to establish some systems for us. One of the last questions I have before we get into other questions from the audience is how you think, I guess, about like they're big institutions, they're small institutions, like, you know, obviously the Philharmonic has been around for, actually today's our birthday, we're 182 years, which is crazy. We have a long way to go at the Philharmonic, as we talked about. I'm being recorded, so I have to be careful. But in any case, I'm curious about like how you see like this work, like not just like with the sort of the folks that we know about already. Like, how do you ensure that like the folks that have been doing the work in the community for decades are also getting the same access, that people get to learn about them as well? What's your strategy for getting them to be also at the table?
Well, again, I think some of that just looks into structures and sort of purpose and mission. So one of the things we've been sort of demoing in our office is this idea within the level of the borough arts directors being very purposeful around creating groups of schools, right? And quantifying the number of those schools, right? So we're clear about, so if you've got 100 schools that you're going to focus on and there's 25 schools that you've articulated that are sort of highlighted in 4 different buckets, what's the mission that's happening in bucket 1? Right. And then how do we best support moving those schools toward the mission you're trying to achieve? And that's where our arts partners come in, because we can really differentiate sort of by borough and by mission, sort of what kind of supports we can match to that school. It's one of the reasons why I thought it was super important to have our arts director in our weekly borough meetings, so that that side of the world could begin to hear and develop a conversation loop around, like, so these are the things we need, and these are the partners that I'm aware of, but do you know of any other partners? Right. And so I think you're going to be experiencing more outreach from us in just trying to better organize who our partners are, what it is that they do, because not all partners should go into every school.
Right. Yep.
And it should all be sort of purpose driven. And for me, that helps. One of the feedback that I got from speaking to partners is, we have these partnership grants, which it's very easy for us to quantify that. There were 265 that we awarded. But beyond that, you all are going out hat in hand and knocking on doors, and we need to be looped into that because we can help guide you. Right? That nature of the work isn't going to stop. Like, we don't want to control that for you, but if we can help you and say, okay, so in Brooklyn North or in Brooklyn South or in the Bronx, like, here's the work that we're doing, and we can be very upfront and transparent with our community about that. How can we help matchmake so that you're not just out there hat in hand knocking on doors randomly? And so I think that's a level of support that if we organize that right in our office, we'll be able to create deeper synergy with all of the resources that you all bring to bear and that we can sort of help organize.
Thank you.
I know that one of the questions that came before this was about Chancellor Banks and his kind of sort of focus on the arts. And I think you also mentioned the fact that he has said that he himself will be the chancellor for the arts, right? That was what we heard a couple months back, and so we're hoping to see that come to fruition. But what I'm recognizing now, even in our conversation, is that you're sort of the actual, you are actualizing that. You're the person that's doing that work. So I really appreciate you and you taking this time to do that. And so props to you and your team for really advancing this work. So thank you. So we're going to get into some conversations, and I'm scared to give away microphone because it's going to start to get crazy. But
I'll grab that one. We'll see what happens.
All right.
Let's try again. Check 1 2. Great. Wonderful. So we're now going to move into audience Q&A. And so if you have a question, I'm just going to ask for you to raise your hand. We're going to try to do as many as we can in this period. So who has a question that they would like to raise? Wonderful. I'm going to go over to Sophia.
Hello, I am Sophia Harrison, the executive. Hi,
How are you doing?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good.
I am the executive director of Arts House Schools of Music, Dance, and Fine Arts in Coney Island, Brooklyn. It's a non-for-profit organization. I am also the president of Arts House Inc., a consulting firm that does art services in New York City and Yonkers. At present, the MCAT process.
Oh man, you had to go right to our
Straight to it. Let's get rid of it. For art services, can we just come straight to your office? Do we really need to go through? It's.
So this is one of those things, like, in 3 months. Wow. So I feel as though, and folks in OASP, again, if I get this wrong, stop me. We don't control the MTAC process, right? So I just got to say that off the bat, right? Right. So that's all going through a different office that I know is like the epitome of like just bureaucratic hell. And so and this is all new to me, right? Because when did I ever participate in dealing with an MTAC process? So we're working internally now. I know there's some information that we have to guide folks through the process, but because of the way the bureaucracy works, we don't actually control the process. We have sort of, I think, a PowerPoint. We have information that we can help provide and guide you through the process, but at the end of the day, we don't control that process. So as maddening as it feels for you, I've been able to watch over 3 months, it feels as maddening for us. So it's not an answer you want, but we are aware, and I think, as we begin to build new systems and this administration sort of begins to settle in, I'm hoping to create new inroads so that hopefully we can get a better window into just the process. But I will tell you, the closer you get to things like budget, it gets more and more convoluted and arcane and crazy. I mean, there's budget questions that I have that the system hasn't been able to give me yet that seem like they should be some pretty simple questions. So I know it's frustrating. I don't really have a better answer other than we will continue to sort of advise and guide in the ways that we have, and continue to advocate on our end to create better systems within the budget office for the MTAC process.
And Paul, I'll add to that as well. The Roundtable now hosts MTAC Mondays. We have another one coming up in January for just that thing. We know it's a hard process. It's something that we find folks are now sharing with one another to be able to get through it, and we want to support. So we'll share when that is. It might actually already be in your program too. But yeah, it requires advocacy though within the DOE. Do you mind? No, spread the wealth a little bit.
Yep.
Oh, this isn't on. Use your theater voice, sorry.
Hi, my name is Asari Dio. I'm a member of the board of the Roundtable and co-chair of this advocacy committee. So on behalf of the Roundtable, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I'm also the executive director of Teachers and Writers Collaborative. We do Writer in the Schools programs where Abiodun Oyewole was a teacher with us back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
So what I want to ask is, as you're building these systems for arts partners and folks doing arts education to connect with your office, how can you include organizations like mine that don't have an arts MTAC, because we do creative writing, we're not under one of those umbrellas, but we're nonetheless doing really important arts education work?
Yeah.
Right. So I think, I don't know, you can hear me, right?
Yeah.
So when I say arts partners, I'm not talking about the partners that only have MTACs, right? So when I have conversations with our director of partnerships, I'm not actually in the mindset yet of thinking like vendor, MTAC vendor. I'm just literally thinking about what does the organization do, and then usually the question I'm asking is, how many schools do we know that they're in? But sort of just trying to figure out what is it that the organization does, and then how can we better help position and inform creating partnerships with schools that are long-standing, that make sense and can be long-standing, which means on some level I would like our office to help in massaging the making sure that it gets embedded in that core instructional focus, because if it does that, then it will have a greater chance to live on, as opposed to just like a semester or a year-long one-off. So I think for me, I don't denote a difference. That detail usually comes out as I begin to ask questions around, right, so how many schools are they in, or what's their capacity, how many schools could they be in? So I don't know if that helps answer your question, but.
Yeah, a little bit. I would say that the Roundtable is a great resource as well to connect with all of the organizations that are doing the work.
And you're doing that.
Well, so I should just say that one of the things that made a lot of sense to me was the moment I met Kimberly, I was like, oh, I probably should meet with you once a week. And so not only have I been trying to meeting with the borough arts directors once a week, I meet with Kimberly once a week, at least. And that has been a really powerful relationship for me to just get a greater understanding around what the Roundtable does, what all of you do, and how can we leverage the power of all of these groups to make sure that we hold the chancellor accountable to what he's been saying, which is he wants to be the chancellor known for the arts. And I'm like, yeah, that should happen. Let's make that happen. And if you guys are leveraged in that, then it becomes that much of a greater possibility.
I think, Christine, did you have your hand up? Or, sorry.
Hi.
Yeah.
I'm Christine Lee. I'm director of the Arts Education Program at the New York State Council on the Arts. So one bureaucracy to another. So my question is, and it may be too early to answer this, and we can certainly revisit, but we know the system is not equitable. And I'm wondering if you're yet seeing patterns in the inequity that are informing your priorities for what to attack. For example, English language learners of certain geographies or anything of that nature.
Yeah. So there's the politic answer to that, and then but I never do that. I'll get myself in trouble. I mean, I think as someone who ran a school in a segregated system, I needed to understand how that system got to be that way, the historical context of it, and then I don't know, this is just how I think about myself. What role do I play in perpetuating that personally?
Right.
And, for a long time I looked in the mirror and was like, well, I'm running this Title I, black and brown high school, no screen. Like, I'm out here doing the work, and yes, I am. But there's still ways in which that just me being me perpetuates the inequities that exist. Not because I do it consciously, but just because it's an unconscious worn path. And so, sure, have I seen ways in which this office or any office in the DOE sort of perpetuates the systemic inequalities? Yes. And I can tell you it's not malice. It's not like folks wake up in the morning and say, well, I just want to do this horrible thing, which is perpetuate our segregated system. No one I've ever met in all of my experience in education is coming with that energy. But you have to be willing to just understand how you are implicated in it and what are you willing to do differently. And so, I think by talking about voice, as the thing that I really focus on, that opens up the playing field in a different kind of way. And it sort of gets into, like, I'll be frank, one of the reasons why I didn't have a relationship with this office as a principal was because my school we didn't prioritize having 4 arts teachers or 2 arts teachers in one discipline that could do sort of like a whole sequence in the ways in which this office understands itself to be set up. And so, in my mind, if I step back, not that the sequences aren't important, but I'd rather have a conversation about voice and sort of how kids are able to express their voice, because not all schools are going to be dedicated to that hardcore sequence that's going to get them, an arts endorsed diploma. Not everybody needs an arts endorsed diploma. The majority of our system really just needs some emotional healing. And that's what focusing on voice does for me, because that's how the arts saved my life. And so I think it's just about talking about the way in which I hope to combat the inequalities is by talking about my work and the work that our office can do in this way. Because everybody's really dedicated to doing the best that we can do for our students. It's just, sometimes you have to be able to step out. And to step out, it's best if you can do it in a safe space. So I really want to create a safe space within our office to examine, like, well, this is how we normally do it. Let's look at the ways that actually might perpetuate what's been going on, and what would happen if we did it
maybe not this way, but this way. And begin to experiment in those ways. And that's what I hope the hub does. It gives us a space to incubate different kinds of ideas. Some may work, some may not work, but at least it's a public conversation around trying and doing different things. So that's some of the ways I'm thinking about it.
So there's one more
One
question.
last question.
Oh, I do have a question. Hi, I'm Rachel Mikulski. I'm an assistant principal in District 75. Today I'm representing the Arts for All Abilities Consortium.
And this is your little person.
Oh, it is, we are representing.
That's right.
And so something that we do as part of the consortium is that we support professional learning for the arts and for students with disabilities. So we want to know, what can the consortium do for you? What can we do for OASP? You mentioned, providing really a space for principals and supporting them. We every year do conferences to just provide professional learning and support for the arts communities, whether it's arts educators, teaching artists, administrators. So what can we provide? What can we do to support?
So we're going to be talking. Because really, again, so you have an idea, you have support that you can provide. In my mind, that again is something that the hub can do, right? So we can sit down, we can have a conversation, and we can see where there's synergy around what you do and the communities of schools that we're working with at any given point. And find like what logically works in that space. That way, we can try things out, we can kick the tires, we can see does this work, and if it does, then we can have a knowledgeable conversation about right, so how can we grow this out in a way so that again, it's not a one-off, right? So much about our system is about doing one-offs. And what I want to be able to do is sort of change the conversation around how do we root this so that it has a long-lasting experience in a school and with our educators and our kids. So I think it just starts with you saying you have something, and we call and we connect and we say, right, so how can we work together?
I think it's safe to say, you're being recorded, that this is not going to be the last time we hear from you.
I hope not.
So I know.
I hope I get to stick around.
I think you will. I think you will. So I for folks that had questions, maybe there'll be time afterwards. If not, I suspect the office will be accessible for any other questions. I want to thank you again, Paul, for your time.
I meant to start with this, but then I got excited and we kind of just went into it. But I first just want to thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it, and it's been great getting to know you. And I think I said this on the phone. I think there's a new energy. There's a new movement. There's a new wave coming, and I look forward to be working with you long term.
Likewise,
in this work. I also want to just thank Kimberly and the Roundtable. This has been a steep curve for me, but you really have, you've been so generous with your time and your patience and with the conversations we've had. So I just have to thank you immensely. And then I want to also just thank all of the folks who were here from OASP. You guys had no idea who I was. And you've all been really incredible in just having patience and in welcoming me in. And I can't thank you all enough, because you all are really teaching me what you do, and I appreciate just the ways in which you've opened up and let me in. So much of how I understand myself as a leader is doing right first by you guys. Because if you can't do your work, then it can't happen for our kids. So I want to shout you guys out and thank you for being here and thank you for welcoming me.
To you all as well for being here with us today. A huge thank you again to Paul and Gary, as well as to the incredible team here at Ballet Hispánico. A shout out to my Roundtable board members who are here. If you're here, just give a wave. As well as my unbelievable colleagues on staff, Alex Latore, Monisha Bayana, as we launch into celebrating 30 years of the Roundtable, that is 30 years that we celebrate of being in service to you. So as Gary said, I know we weren't able to get to all the questions. Please come see me, come see one of my colleagues. We want to write them down. We want to get them answered because we know it helps you do your best work, which is helping our students and communities succeed in and through the arts. So be sure to save the date for Face to Face 2023 coming up April 12th and 13th in person, as well as some virtual programs as well. And also get ready for some arts education advocacy because we all know it starts with the arts. There we go. Wonderful. Have a happy, healthy, and safe holiday season. Thank you all for joining us today.